Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we will be looking at a step-by-step guide on how to set up Active Directory domain services on Windows Server 2019. So let's begin. The first thing I want to do is to open my web browser and download the ISO image for Windows Server 2019. So I'll open my web browser, click in and download Windows Server 2019 and press enter. The first thing I want to click on is the Windows Server 2019 on the Microsoft Evaluation Center page. So I'll click on it. I'll give it a few seconds and let that website to load up. As soon as we are taken to the page for downloading Windows Server 2019, we want to scroll down and click on download the ISO. So I'll click on download ISO. Next, we will be taken to this page where we need to register for a free trial to download Windows Server 2019. So go ahead and fill this form, and then at the end, you click on download now. So I'm going to do that. After filling the form and clicking on download now, we are taken to this next page to allow us to download the Windows Server 2019. So at this page, we have a few options. We can download Windows Server 2019 in different languages. For me, I speak English, so I'm going to stick to English United States. At the English United States, we have a few options. So we have the option to download a virtual disk of Windows Server 2019, or we can download Windows Server for Azure. For us, we want to use the ISO downloads, so we will click on 64-bit edition. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to begin the 64-bit download of the ISO image. So I'm just going to cancel that because I've already downloaded the ISO image for Windows Server 2019. So make sure you download that, and once that is complete, then you can proceed with the next step in the video. The next thing we want to do is to look at the hardware requirement for installing Windows Server 2019. So I'm just going to open a new tab, and I will search for Windows Server 2019 hardware requirements. Click on hardware requirement for Windows Server. So I'll click on that page, and now I'm taken to the Microsoft website. When we are taken to the Microsoft website where we are looking at the hardware requirements for installing Windows Server 2019, the first thing we want to take a look at is the processor information. So for processor, we need a minimum processor speed of 1.4 gigahertz. So just make note of that. So the next thing we want to do is look at the memory requirement. Microsoft recommends that you use a minimum of 512 megabytes of RAM. But if we want to install 2019 server and have the full graphical user interface, Microsoft recommends that we use at least 2 gigabytes of RAM. So we want to take note of that. So for storage, which is the hard drive requirement, Microsoft recommends that we use a minimum of 32 gigabytes of hard drive space. Additional hardware requirement will be we will need a network adapter. We will need an optional DVD drive. That is if we are installing Windows Server 2019 from DVD. But for us, we will be installing it from the ISO image, so we really don't need the DVD drive. So these are the various requirements. So make sure you take your time and just read through the requirement and just familiarize yourself with it so that you are not faced with any surprises during the installation of Windows Server 2019. The next thing we need is a Type 2 hypervisor. So for a Type 2 hypervisor, we have a few options that we could use. One, we could either use Oracle VirtualBox, which is very popular. A lot of people love to use it. So that's an option that we can use to create our virtual machine. But in this exercise, I'm just going to stay to all Microsoft. So I'm going to use a Microsoft Hyper-V Manager. I'm currently using Windows 11, and I already have Microsoft Hyper-V Manager enabled. So if you don't know how to enable Microsoft Hyper-V Manager on Windows 11 or on Windows 10, I'll make sure to leave a link to a video that I did previously on how to do that in the YouTube card, as well as leave a link in the description down below so that you can follow along and enable Microsoft Hyper-V Manager on your Windows 10 computer or on your Windows 11 computer. So I'm just going to click on Start. I'm going to type the word Hyper, and it's going to show me Hyper-V Manager. So I'm going to click on that, and then it's going to open my Hyper-V manager. The next thing I want to do here is I can either click on Action and come to New and click on Virtual Machine, or I can right-click on my computer name, come to New and click Virtual Machine, or I could come to Action on the right and click on New and then come to Virtual Machine. So I'm just going to just click on Virtual Machine right here, and then it's going to open the new Virtual Machine wizard. So the next thing I'm going to do is to click on Next, and then this place allows me to put a name for my virtual machine. So I'm just going to name it SV arrow for server. I'm going to put hyphen, and I'm going to put DC for domain controller. And since this is going to be my first domain controller, I'm just going to put 01. So you can give it any name, but I'm just going to keep it to this name. Right below the name, we are given the option to select a location on our computer where we want to save our virtual machine. So if we want to change this location, all you have to do is activate this place and go to browse, and just browse to where you want to save your virtual machine. For me, I'm just going to keep it to the default location, so I will just click Next. At the next screen, we are given the option to specify which generation we want to use. For the most part, go for generation 2 because that has a better option than generation 1. So you take generation 2 and click Next. At this stage, we are asked to define the memory. If we can remember, if for installing a full graphical user interface of Windows Server 2019, we require a minimum of 2 GB of RAM according to Microsoft. So my computer has 16 GB of RAM. So I'm just going to keep it to 4 GB for memory. So I'm just going to keep it on the default option so that the virtual machine manager can use dynamic memory for this particular virtual machine. So I'll keep that option active and click Next. This next option allows us to define the network connection. By default, the network connection is set to not connected. So if I click on the down arrow, I can connect it to the default switch. So I'll just click on Connect to default switch, and I'll go to Next. At this next screen, we are given the option to give a name to our virtual hard disk. By default, it picks the name of the computer and then it associated that with the name of the virtual hard disk. So I'm just going to keep it to that default option. Then it also has a default location where the virtual hard drive will be saved. For any reason that you want to relocate your virtual hard drive, you can always browse and pick a location on your computer to save your virtual hard disk. I'm just going to cancel that, keep it to the default. The next area is the size of the virtual hard drive. I'm just going to leave it to the default of 127 GB for my virtual hard drive. Then we have a second option here, which is to use an existing virtual hard disk. This would have been the option we would pick had we downloaded the virtual hard disk from Microsoft website instead of downloading the ISO. So if we had downloaded the virtual hard disk, or if we have a virtual hard disk from another computer that has the Windows Server 2019, we can pick this option, and then it will allow us to browse to the location for the virtual hard drive and connect it to this computer. Or we can attach a virtual hard drive later, which is the third option. So I'm just going to keep it back to the first option and then click Next. At this stage, we are asked to select the installation option. So if your ISO image is still being downloaded, you will keep it to this option to install the operating system later. Or if you already have the ISO image downloaded, then you pick the second option and then you browse to the ISO image. Or if you want to do a network installation, you pick the third option. So right now, I already have the ISO image downloaded, so I can pick the second option. But I will assume that you are still downloading your ISO image and you are following along. So I'm just going to keep it on the first option, install operating system later, so I can just show you how you can do that later. So I'll keep it to that. I'll click Next. This last screen just pretty much gives us a summary of all of the hardware settings that we have defined for our virtual machine. I'm satisfied with them. I'll click on Finish. So right now we have set up the virtual machine. You can right click on this virtual machine and come to Settings, and you can always change any of the hardware that you define during the setup of that virtual machine. So do not feel like you are stuck with what you pick For example, if for any reason I want to change the memory size, I can just click on memory and I can change the memory size. So I will just come down to SCSI controller, and then I will click on SCSI controller and I will click on DVD drive, and I will add a DVD drive. So once I add a DVD drive, then it gives me this option for the DVD drive. So once I add the DVD drive, I have the option now to browse to my ISO image. So I will assume at this point your ISO image has completed downloading. So you will click on image file and you will click on browse. And then you just go and browse to where you have your ISO image downloaded. So I will just go to my download folder. I have the ISO images in this folder called ISO. So I'm just going to double click it. And this is the 2019 image. So I'm just going to click on it and click on open. So once I'm done connecting my ISO image to my virtual machine, the next thing I can do is to click on the processor. For any reason that you need to increase the number of processor, you can just click on processor and increase it. I will just keep it to what I have here that was selected by default. Then the next thing I want to do is to come to integration services. So I want to come to integration services and just make sure I will check this option, guest services. So I'm just going to enable that. After selecting guest services, I'm just going to go back to the hardware requirement for installing Server 2019. I want to point out something I didn't talk about. So if we want to use BitLocker drive encryption, we want to make sure that we are activating the TPN or the Trusted Platform module. So it's something just to remember, where you can find that when you come in the settings of your virtual machine, just click on security and there you can enable Trusted Platform module. So you can just enable that and then you can apply and then you click on OK. So once that is done, I will minimize this window. Now my virtual machine is all connected with the ISO image. The next thing I'm going to do is just to double click on the virtual machine. And then once it opens, I'm just going to click on start. So this is going to power on my virtual server. And when you look in the background, you can see the status that the state is showing that it is running. It means my virtual computer is on. So I'm going to give it some time to allow my virtual computer to boot up. At the first screen for installing Windows Server 2019, make sure you select the language that you want to install Windows Server 2019 in. Select your time and set your currency format and select the keyboard you are using. For me, I'm just going to keep it to the default. I will click on next. At the next screen, I will just click on install now. At this screen, we are given the option to select the version of Windows Server 2019 we want to install. So we can either install Windows Server 2019 as a standard edition or as a data center edition. But with the data center edition and the standard edition, we have two options. We have the one that has the desktop experience. So that pretty much will install Windows Server 2019 as a fully graphical user interface where you have the start menu and all of those icons and things like that. For the standard edition or the data center edition that doesn't have the desktop experience associated with it, pretty much is going to install it as a core. And core simply means that it's just going to be a command line version of Windows Server 2019. So those are the two options that we have depending on the edition that we want to install. So I'm going to click on install Windows Server 2019 as a standard edition, and I'm going to click next. I will make sure to leave a link in the video description down below that will take you to the official Microsoft website where you can look at the difference between either using the standard edition or using the data center edition of Windows Server 2019. So I'm going to keep it to standard edition, full desktop experience, and I'm going to click on next. At this stage, I'm prompted to read the end user license agreement. So take the time to read through the end user license agreement. I'm just going to accept the terms and conditions of the end user license agreement, and I will click on next. At this stage, we are given two options. The first option is to upgrade. So you will use this first option if you already have an existing Windows Server. So let's say you have Windows Server 2016 and you want to upgrade to 2019. You will pick this first option. For us, we don't have anything. It's a blank computer. So we're just going to click the second option, custom install. And then we are brought to the hard drive We're just going to use the entire hard drive space and just click on Next. And by clicking on Next, the installation of Windows Server 2019 will begin. So I'm going to pause the video and allow that to go through. And once that is done, I'm going to come back and then continue with the rest of the video. So during the installation of Windows Server 2019, the system will perform several reboots, but because we still have the ISO image of this Server 2019 connected, it's going to reboot and it may prompt us, telling us press any key to boot from CD. Make sure you do not press any key because it's going to just override the installation that you have completed. You don't want to do that, so just ignore it and let it to just reboot and will allow you to log in. So right now I'm prompted to reboot. I'm just going to say restart now, and it's going to restart. After our computer restarted, we are brought to the customization settings. So by default, the first user that is created is administrator. So we are given the option to define a password for the administrator. So I'm just going to put a simple password that I'm going to use for my administrator. And now we'll click on finish. But the password needs to be complex. So I'm just going to make it complex. And this is something that we'll go into in much details what it means by password complexity. Usually it means the password should have an uppercase character or lowercase character and sometimes a special symbol and a number. So you just need a password like that. And then by default with Microsoft, you need a minimum of 8 characters for the password. So I'll put in a complex password. I'm just going to click on finish. At this stage, I'm giving my option to define how big I want my monitor size to be for my virtual computer. So right now it's giving me 13600 by 768. So I'm just going to increase that to large and it's going to make it a full screen. So I'm just going to click connect. I'm going to be given a full screen. So I'm going to use the password that I created to log in. So I'll press enter and then it's going to create the user profile for the administrator. At this stage, once it logs in for the first time, it's going to ask me if I want to allow my computer to be discoverable on the network. So it tells you that this is recommended for home network or work network. I'm just going to click on yes. So once that is done, I'm going to close this screen. And then this is the Windows Server Dashboard Manager. The next thing I want to do is to click on Local Server. So when I click on Local Server, it brings me the information of my virtual computer. So if you notice that during the installation, Windows will usually just pick a random name and give it to your computer. So I want to change that computer name. So I'm just going to click on the computer name and then click on change to change my computer name. So I'm going to change the name of this computer to the name that I gave to this virtual machine, which was SVR for server -DC for domain controller. And this is my first domain controller, so I'll put 01. And I will just click on OK. It's going to ask me to restart for the changes to take effect. I'm just going to click on OK. I will click on close. And I will say restart later. The next thing I want to do is to come to the time zone and click on it. So I'm just going to change my time zone. I'm in the Eastern Standard Time Zone, so I'm going to pick New York as my time zone, so which is Eastern Standard. So I'll pick Eastern Standard. Make sure to pick the appropriate time zone that applies to you and click on OK and click on OK. The next thing I want to do is to go to my Ethernet settings. So I will click on IP address. So I'm going to double click on this. So I will click on details and you'll notice that DHCP is enabled. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So basically this computer got an IP address automatically from my home router. I don't want to use an automatic IP address because this is going to be a server. You don't want it to have an automatic IP address because the IP address works on a lease basis. So you don't want it to change because your devices wouldn't be able to connect to your server. So you want to configure a static address. So I'm going to click on close. I'm going to click on properties, come to Internet Protocol version 4, click on that. So So I'll click on properties. I'll click on use the following IP address. I'll define my IP address at 10.10.10.1. The next thing I want to define my subnet mask, so I'll say 255.255.255. Then I'll count for my default gateway. Right now, I don't have a default gateway, which is usually a router, so I'll just leave that area blank. For DNS, because the Windows Server 2019 is going to have the Windows Active Directory domain services running on it, Microsoft recommends that it also be the same server that has your DNS services on it. So I'm just going to put the same IP address for DNS, 10.10.10.1. And I'll click OK. And I'll click Close. And details, I have a static IP address. So that's what I want. I'll click Close. I'll click Close. The next thing I'm going to do is to close this, click on Start and restart the server so that the name change can take effect. So I'm just going to click on Restart. So I will just choose the option Operating System Reconfiguration Plan. So I will pick that as the reason why I'm restarting this server and click on Continue. Once it restarts, I'm going to log back in. Click Enter. I'll just close this and now I'll click on Local Server. And now I can see that my computer name has changed to the name I put on it, and also has my static IP address, and also has the appropriate time zone that I needed. So pretty much that's how we install Windows Server 2019, and we took our time to rename the computer to give it the name that we want, and then also we give it a static IP address, and then the next thing we did was to define our time zone. So simply because this computer is running Windows Server 2019, this doesn't automatically make this computer a server. For right now, it is just a regular computer. It is not a server. The only way this computer can become a server is when we install a service on it. So right now, it doesn't have a service on it, so it's simply just a Windows Server 2019 operating system that was installed on the computer. So it's just like an ordinary computer. So we're going to install our first service. The first service we're going to install today will be the Active Directory Domain Services. To do that, we click on Manage and click on Add Roles and Features. So I will click on that, and then it will bring the Add Roles and Feature wizard. So I'll click on Next, and then I have two options to either select role-based or feature-based installation, or you perform a remote desktop services installation. For now, I'm going to keep it to the first option, role-based or feature-based installation, and click on Next. If we have several computers on our network that have a server operating system, they will all be listed below here. But for now, we only just have the first Windows Server 2019, so which is this. So we'll just keep it active and click on Next. Then we want to make sure we select Active Directory Domain Services, which is the second option. So make sure you click that second option. So once we select the Active Directory Domain Services, we are prompted with this message saying that Active Directory Domain Services cannot be installed on this computer unless we have all of these roles and features added. So we're just going to keep all of them that added, and then we're also going to keep it to include the management tools. If applicable, we're going to keep that option active, and we're just going to click on Add Features. So once that is done, then we click on Next. Then it's going to select these features, the group policy management and all of these various remote server administration tools going to be active. These are the various dependencies that the Windows Server Active Directory Domain Services need. So we just keep those active and we just click on Next. Then it's just telling us that it's going to install the Active Directory Domain Services. So we are happy with that. That's what we want to do. So we'll click on Next. At this next stage, we are giving a confirmation of all the services and features that will be installed. So we see a list of it here below. And then right above that, we are given the option to check this place if we want our server to automatically restart. I do not want to automatically restart my server, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. I'm just going to click on install and allow the Active Directory domain services to be installed with the various features that it needs to work properly. So I'm going to give it a while and I'll let that to install. After the installation of the Active Directory domain services, the next thing we're going to do is to promote this server so that it can become a domain controller. So we're just going to click right on the option, promote this server to a domain controller. So I will click on that and then it's going to open up. On the Active Directory domain services configuration wizard opens, we have few options. The first option is to add a domain controller to an existing domain. We currently do not have an existing domain, so we cannot use this first option. The next option is to add a new domain to an existing forest. Again, we do not have an existing forest because we are just starting up everything from scratch. So we're going to pick the third option, which is to add a new forest. So this is going to be our very first forest. So we're going to click that option. And then we're just going to put the name of our domain. You want to make sure that you have a proper name defined for your company. So you're going to put that in here. So for my domain, I'm just going to put Kou Louise Academy.org. And now I'll click next. At the next screen, which is the domain controller option, Microsoft recommends that your very first domain controller also have your DNS services on it. So I'm going to keep that option so that I can install my domain name system server services on this. And then because also is the first domain controller, is also going to host the global catalog. So I'm going to keep those two options active. The third option is grayed out because the very first domain controller cannot be a read-only domain controller. For this option to be active, you need to have at least one domain controller, and then you could make subsequent domain controller to be a read-only domain controller. So we'll just ignore that third option for now. So the last area allows you to define a password for the directory services restore mode. So pretty much if your Active Directory for some reason crashes and you have a backup of the Active Directory database, you will need to enter in this DSRM password in order to restore your Active Directory server. So we'll just put in a password and we'll repeat that password. And most time for security reasons, the password should be different from your administrator password to log into the computer. And then we'll click next. And at the next screen, we are given the option to create DNS dedication. We don't want to do that. We'll just ignore that and then click next. So the next screen is going to automatically define the NetBIOS name. So we'll keep it to that and we'll click next. At the path, it's telling us that the Active Directory database will be saved in this location into the NTDS folder, and the log files will also be saved in that same folder as well. And then the system volume files will be saved in the sysvol folder. So those are the default options. I'm going to leave them to the default and click on next. At this stage, we are given the option to review all the settings that we select. We also have the option to view everything as a script, and we can save this script and we can use PowerShell to deploy subsequent domain controller if we need them to have similar settings. So I'm just going to minimize that and I'll just click on next. It's going to check to make sure that all the prerequisites are installed before it can continue. So it tells us all prerequisites passed successfully. So the next thing is click on install. Then you're going to start the installation. Now we are told that you are about to be signed out, so we need to restart the computer for everything to take effect. So we'll click on close. So we're going to put in our username, which is the administrator name, and then we'll put in our password. Press enter. So now we have Active Directory installed on this computer. So to verify that Active Directory is installed, we can click on Start and we'll come to Administrative Tools. We click on it and now we have Active Directory Users and Computers. So when we click on that, it opens the Active Directory Users and Computer and we can see our domain. So our domain is here, and then our various organization units are also here as well. So pretty much that's it. So that's how we install Windows Server 2019, define a static IP address, rename the computer, change our time zone, install Active Directory domain services on the computer, and then the next thing we do, we promoted the computer to become a domain controller. We also had DNS configure on it, and pretty much that's it. With that being said, we'll bring this video to an end. In the next video, we'll look at how we can set up a DHCP server, and then we'll look at how we can join computer to this domain. But without further ado, take care, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.